Ed, thank you so much for joining me right now for this conversation and for being a part of NFT.NYC coming up in Times Square, New York, June 20th through the 23rd. You have a very unique background, much different than many of the speakers that we've been able to invite to participate. Would you mind letting the NFT.NYC community know a bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Let me talk about my background. I spent 28 years teaching at Princeton University in computer science and later in the public policy school also. And that's really where I got into the whole blockchain cryptocurrency space. During that time, I took leaves a couple times to work in the federal government. Probably the most important role I had there was as deputy CTO of chief technical officer of the U.S. government and a senior advisor to President Obama. So I've done a bunch of things in the academic world. I've done a bunch of things in government, but for the last 2 or 3 years, I have been focused on building Arbitrum after starting the project with a couple of my then students.
So you've had this really extensive background in higher education, in government, and now really focused a lot on what's happening in what we call Web3 and all of this new development of the decentralized tech infrastructure. So when you look at these different industries, right, government, higher education, and this kind of future tech environment, what are some similarities that are strung throughout these different environments, and what are things that are quite a bit different from one another?
I mean, higher education is big and varied, and government is big and varied, but the thing that's really run through what I've done and where I've been in those places is people are trying to figure out what kind of a future to build, right? So in academia, as a computer science researcher, I was all about trying to understand what's happening in the tech space, try to get out ahead of it, try to figure out how to steer it in a better direction that's going to be better for people. Same thing in government, right? I was a senior advisor to the president and really trying to, again, work with people across the government, work with people in senior roles, try to figure out what's happening, how can we make it better? So now with the company, with actually building tech and getting it out there, it's just a hands-on way of doing the same thing. Right now, we've been talking about things, we've been trying to make them happen with our voice. And now we're actually building tech to try to create this world that we want to live in.
So why do you think the L2, the layer 2 blockchains will end up becoming the home of the metaverse? Because that's one of the things that we're really seeking you to give information during the event. But why don't you give us some insight now, why you think it's the L2 chains that really are going to facilitate the future of what we're all calling the metaverse?
Well, there's a lot that we like about L1 chains. They're secure, they're decentralized, at least the better ones are. But the areas where they have not been as good are in scalability. How much traffic can they handle, which really translates to how many people can actually get in on this game, and cost. How much does it cost to do a transaction? And then how quickly do you get your result back? So we've really been focusing in building L2s at taking the parts of L1 that everybody loves, decentralization and security, keep that, and then add in the things that are missing there. And there's been huge progress made over the last year or two in making L2s really attractive and practical to operate on a large scale. And I think we're really seeing L2 emerging right about now to be really a major player in this area.
When you think about the future of the metaverse and NFTs, what industries do you think it might impact last? What industries might be slow to adopt what's being developed in NFTs and the metaverse in general?
Well, in some ways, it may be sort of old school traditional tech companies. I think what we're likely to see is what has happened with a bunch of technologies in the past, right? A lot of companies, a lot of sectors and industries thought, well, we don't do that. First, they said we're not tech companies or we're not software companies. Then they said we're not internet companies or we're not mobile companies, right? Now they're saying we're not social, we're not metaverse, but it'll catch up to them, right? This is a set of capabilities that are going to be attractive across a whole bunch of industries. Some industries, sectors will be slower to recognize it. Some will start doing it without even kind of realizing it at the corporate level. But it's a really attractive combination of things that people love. And so it's going to be eating everything in the same way that first software did and then the internet did.
And so when you think of this progression, what's happening today, not just the future projections, but what's happening today that is really standing out to you in terms of like, wow, look at this development and look at these different developments that are saying, here are forerunners, here are examples of what's to come.
Sure. I mean, one thing that's happening is the scale is going up. The number of people involved, the number of companies and projects, just the rate of innovation has really been expanding a lot. But we're also starting to see that along with that scale, we're starting to see more complex and creative ways of putting together these pieces of social and NFTs and gaming and in other kinds of experiences. I really think we're like starting to see what that sort of Cambrian explosion of all kinds of new and different things coming into being. And the tech is there to enable that to happen.
So one of the main themes for us this year is diversity, the diversity of utility, the diversity of projects, the diversity of approaches, the diversity of L1 and L2 blockchains that are being leveraged for this development. When you kind of survey what's happening, what is diverse in your mind that maybe people aren't noticing or recognizing yet that are kind of unique projects and unique approaches to this industry?
It's a great question. I often, frankly, have my head down and focusing on trying to make something that's useful to people. I think, the mindset that we're in our team is we're trying to build a platform that is as useful to as many people as we can make it, and trying to then foster the creativity that happens at higher levels. But one thing I'm really excited about is this technology expanding across the world and starting to see cross-cultural and applications that are in different cultures and in different sort of lifestyles and ways of seeing the world than we have. There's a set of people who've been out front on these things, who are more techie, who are more artistic, who are early adopters. But I think really interesting stuff starts to happen when it spreads more broadly to a broader set of cultural settings.
Do you want to tell us a bit about Offchain Labs and Arbitron and what it is that's diverse and unique that your team is bringing to market? Because your team was at first just a bunch of founders, and now several dozen people are part of the team. And so you're growing, you're scaling, you're doing something different than some other folks in the market. Let us know a bit about that.
Yeah, so what we're really focused on is taking what Ethereum provides and making it cheaper, faster, and support a lot more people. So we started just with an idea of how to do this. And as we've grown and as we've engaged with customers and users and developers and artists and so on, we've seen an amazing explosion of different ideas and different kinds of applications coming on. We've also grown our team. We've grown our team around the world. We have people, we often joke that even though we're a relatively small team, that we have somebody awake and working every single hour of the day. We started with the idea that we would be a centralized team, we'd be headquartered in New York, but then COVID came and it forced us to be distributed, and we're not going back, because the advantages of having people all over the place, all over the world, all over the US, for those who are domestic, that's really been huge for us. And we're going to continue to do that. And not only just because of being at different times and having access to more talent, but really having different perspectives, having people in different places and with different backgrounds who are all part of this effort.
Now you're in DC, and as you mentioned, you spent a lot of time in the political arena. And so do you feel like there's a different view of the metaverse and the NFT industry in DC than there is in other areas, like you mentioned New York, where eventually you were going to be headquartered?
Sure, and I've talked to a lot of people who are in and around government and in the policy world about this stuff. There's a lot of curiosity there. There's some mixed opinion. Some people are pretty skeptical of this. Others are believers in it without sometimes even knowing exactly why. But I do think there is an openness. I see a lot of that. People want to learn, they want to understand what's going on, and they're open to, to our community making the case that what we're doing is valuable and that's going to be something that more and more people love. So, there's this mindset sometimes that government is really sort of slow and doesn't get it. But I think there's a real distinction between the individuals who are working in government in the policy world, who are mostly very smart and good at listening and persuadable on the one hand, versus the institutions, which just by their nature are designed to move slowly. So, we're talking to a lot of people trying to change minds and educate people, and they want to learn.
So, we live in a nation and a culture that is the us and them, right? So I'm part of this political camp, and so we're the good ones and they're the bad ones, and it can be this way with just about anything in today's culture. And so since you've worked in these large institutions like the government and Princeton, one of the most honored and respected higher education institutions in the world, there's the institutions, right? And then there's the people that are part of the institutions. Do you feel like the people that are part of the institutions are drastically affected by the slow moving of their institution? Or are there a lot of entrepreneurial people that are forward thinking and, really open to decentralization in these approaches? And can you give us a bit of insight in terms of how you've navigated that and how the rest of the industry should navigate relationships with some of these individuals that are part of these large institutions?
Sure. And let me talk specifically about government, because I think there are a bunch of misconceptions there. There are a lot of people there who are entrepreneurial in the sense of figuring out how to get things done, and who can be great allies. On the other hand, we have these institutions which are designed to move slowly, right? Legislature, our Constitution and our legislative process, our policy process is designed to move slowly, to be really careful, and so on. And so people who work in government are often sort of struggling with that. So it's not so much that they're not listening, not open to ideas, not interested in moving quickly themselves. It's just that they have to build a lot of consensus within this very large structure. But working with them and working with government is all about building relationships and building trust. And if folks there get to know you and they get to believe that you're an honest broker, that you'll give them good advice and you'll give them good tips and so on, that it can be a two-way relationship and not just you showing up and saying, you idiot, you should do this other thing, or even just showing up and saying, please do this thing for me. If you're willing to have a relationship and contribute what you bring to the table, which as a member of this community is your knowledge about the community and your enthusiasm for it. If you bring that to the table and have a back and forth conversation, you can change minds over time. And if government is like a giant oil tanker, which is very slow to get started and very slow to turn, once it gets moving, there's nothing stopping it. So like helping to get it moving in the right direction can have a huge payoff.
That's a great perspective. I like that. Well, as we wrap up our conversation, maybe you could tell us a bit about your viewpoint of decentralization.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that are in this industry that are building, and they're decentralization maximists, right? Everything decentralized at any cost, no matter how slow it is or how expensive it is or what type of hurdles there are. That's all that matters, and centralization is only bad. So there's that camp. And then there's lots of people that are like, hey, decentralization is best, but we can decentralize where it's beneficial. So where do you land? And how did you get there? Because I'm assuming that your perspective of decentralization changed after getting involved with the Web3 industry.
It has. I mean, I've been a big proponent of decentralization for a long time, even before this stuff all got going. But, fundamentally, first of all, as an engineer and a builder, I'm always trying to think practically, what can we do? How will it work? What will the impact be? Decentralization to me is key, but it's really about power. Who has the power? Who has a veto? Who has who can grab the steering wheel and make the system go where they want, or who can stomp on the brake and stop it. So decentralization is all about making sure that the power to influence what happens in a system is properly distributed so that the technology and the things around it are ultimately accountable to the people who are using it. So how you do that is not always easy, right? Because as we know, designing decentralized technologies is hard. Designing decentralized governance is hard. But it's a battle that we have to fight, and we have to be smart about how we do it. To me, decentralization is not negotiable, but how you decentralize is the key question.
So let's take Princeton as an example. Or if you want, you could say not Princeton, but someone like Princeton.
That's
so
fine.
With Princeton, there's a lot of people involved. There's the staff, there's the students, there's the alumni, and many other
Sure.
different groups.
Mm-hmm.
Who would, in your mind, it be best to start the process of decentralization for? The teachers and the staff, or the students? And how, if Princeton comes to you and says, hey, we want to decentralize any areas that we can and that would be beneficial in the next 10 years. And they say, why don't you give us some ideas on what should we do in the next couple of years to go that direction?
Well, so a lot of it has to do with governance, how are decisions made? And in some respects, academic institutions are pretty well decentralized, meaning that, I was a member of the computer science faculty, and the computer science faculty got to decide within pretty broad guidelines what is taught in the computer science curriculum and what is required to get a computer science degree and so on. As a teacher, I had autonomy to make decisions about what I was going to teach and how my course was going to be structured and so on. So like in the decisions about how education gets done, that is very decentralized. Not everything is decentralized. I can't just sell degrees to Princeton degrees to my friends or to the highest bidder. There are some standards, but the decisions about sort of the content of the education, very decentralized. So I think more of that to try to, especially when you're engaged in an intellectual activity like a university, its goal is the creation and dissemination of knowledge. You want the people who are creating the knowledge and disseminating the knowledge to have autonomy to make decisions about how that's going to work. Now, at the same time, it's a large institution. It has a lot of parts, like it owns land. The university is a landlord. It's a food service provider, and it does a bunch of things that really benefit from more centralized management. I was happy when I was there that I didn't have to figure out who was going to cut the grass outside my building, that there is, a building and grounds group who does that. And so some aspects of the sort of centralized management do make sense. But when you're talking about what is the mission of the entity and how can it do that mission, making sure that it's decentralized in a reasonable way is pretty important. But it really is context dependent.
Well, as a world-class teacher that's spent a big part of the last 3 decades, teaching some of the brightest minds in the world at Princeton, we're excited for you to come and teach our community. And so thank you for being a part of our event. We're grateful to have you come and share your perspective on why L2s will likely be the home of the metaverse as it begins to materialize and manifest. So thank you for being a part of this. And for anybody that's watching this conversation, thank you for your attention. I'll be back again soon with another one of these. Ed, again, we appreciate you. We're very grateful to have you be part of what we're doing.
Thank you.